This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
Better, on what? Relative to what?
To them, if you said who's a better baseball player, Shohei Ohtani or Babe Ruth,
then
I'm taking Shohei.
Who is a better baseball player, Babe Ruth or Bob Dahlbeck?
Hey, Patriots fans. At the top of the show.
We got those out of the way before the show started.
We're going to get right into it. We did get into a conversation that Alex is dying to talk about on today's show.
You guys would not believe the take. He says he'll give it next week, so I'm not.
It's
nothing scandalous, but
I gotta watch a little bit more.
Watch
okay?
who, Evan?
All right. So full disclosure, I didn't want to do this at the top. I was gonna tease this at the end, but might as well because now everybody's just gonna be like, "Well, I'm not gonna listen to this show. I'm just gonna wait till next week." So my bye-week project is that I am going to watch as many of the top guys at the top of the draft as I possibly can, because I know people on our show, they listen to our show for our draft takes. You're obviously always ahead of me at this point of the season, and they want to hear what I have to say about the top of the draft. So today, it's a monumental day. It's really, this is right in the heart of Catch-22, so I got to bring this up. It's a monumental day when I go on my computer and I make the folder on my desktop 2025 NFL draft.
You should have let me come get a
right?
video
It's
of it.
like it's literally you should really I kind of feel like in Christmas Vacation when he goes and he plugs the lights in and they do the drum roll. Like that's exactly what it feels like for me when the draft. Not only the folder on the desktop, but then you got the spreadsheet and everything starts rolling. So today, and we can get to the take maybe at the end of the show if we have time, I downloaded the very first game of LSU's offense.
I was going to say, don't say who it is. Save that.
To LSU's offense to watch one Will Campbell and start this thing off a little bit here. We got to get it rolling, and it's a little disappointing. I think all of us, just to segue this right into the...
Not Will Campbell is disappointed, to be clear.
No. But to segue this into what's currently happening with the Patriots, it is definitely sad that now for, the last at least 2 years, I would say. I mean, 22, they had his football season, so I wouldn't say 22 counts. But for the last 2 years, last year I watched the very first Drake Maye tape was the Pittsburgh game. That Thursday night Pittsburgh game. I watched the very first Drake Maye tape on Thursday before the game. So that's, I believe, was week 14, I want to say.
Yeah, it was like right before Christmas.
So we're right in the same area, week 13, week 14.
Oh, you know what? It was the week of Army-Navy, because that's why they were playing on Thursday night, so first week in December.
Yeah, so we're right in the same area that I started watching draft tape.
Did you watch
for
Drake
24.
before you watched Jane Daniels?
No, I watched them in order. I watched Caleb, Jaden, Drake, I think. And
so you'd already started at that point.
Yeah. And, it's not what I want to be doing. I love the draft. We both love the drafts. I shouldn't say it like that. I don't know. I'd much rather be focused on the NEP and what's happening with the Patriots right now. I absolutely would. And unfortunately, we're just not in that place right now as a team. But before we get into all of that, I do want to say a couple things here off the top about today's show. So we're only on for an hour because of Thanksgiving on Thursday. The whole week has kind of been flipped upside down this week here. So we're trying to cram a lot of things in so that everybody can take the day off on Thursday as we should. So we're here for an hour. We're going to try to take maybe some calls at the end, but I'm going to tell you right now we might not get the calls. So I just want to warn everybody off the bat right there.
I'll be quick.
And we have a few ad reads that I want to get to just to get these out of the way. So attention, Pats Nation, the most nail-biting action film of the season, Carry On, starring Taron Egerton, Sophie Carson, and Jason Bateman. I know Jason Bateman, good actor. Touches down on Netflix on December 13th, just in time for the holidays. Only liquids allowed, blood, sweat, and tears. Catch Carry On December 13th on Netflix. For fans heading to the game on Sunday, December 1st, you can score an exclusive stadium-compliant game day carry-on bag and experience the larger-than-life photo installation. And our favorite ad read as well. Massachusetts is made for everyone, for leaf peepers, corn maze strollers, regatta lovers, pumpkin pickers, and anyone else you can think of. Come to where there's something for everyone this fall. Massachusetts, where everything is made possible. Plan your trip at visitma.com. Okay, so here's where I want to start the show, just talking about this game against the Dolphins, this loss to Miami down in Miami. And I can't say that defensively, Alex, I'm all that surprised that they couldn't stop the Dolphins offense. Said it all last week. We talked about it on this show. Just didn't really seem like on paper they sized up very well against Miami. A lot of, issues in the middle of the field, particularly. I felt like linebackers, safeties, speed for the Dolphins scheme. I mean, those things all kind of came to roost. I think the biggest thing, though, that came to roost is this offensive line. And we've talked about it. I've gassed it up a little bit, how they've been able to hold this thing together with duct tape for a while here with Drake Maye and at least mitigate by coaching around it. Obviously, with Drake, having him back there changes a lot. Ball comes out quicker, more athletic quarterback. But with all that being said, the Chickens came back home to roost on Sunday with the penalties, the execution, 42% pressure rate on May in this game. And I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty details about how the Dolphins did it. But just in general, this felt like one of those games where we knew that this was a team that was far away, and all the issues that we know exist all kind of came to play in one game.
Yeah, and a lot of the Dolphins' strengths match up with the Patriots' weaknesses. I mean, you look right there on the line, and Chop Robinson, was one of their top draft picks and has been a good player for them this year, going up against the Patriots' weakness in a tackle. The Dolphins have these great wide receivers, and we talked last week about the depth at the secondary being a question, and that got exposed again on Sunday. So tough matchup. It hurts because so much of what beat them last week against the Rams came back to haunt them. You thought you might see a wrinkle or two to adjust. It's a again, a system they just put in. Drake Maye talked about this after the game. Similar system to the one that just beat them. It's also a team they're familiar with. Like, this is the same Dolphins team that, it's a new coaching staff, but these guys on the defensive side of the ball have been preparing for pretty much however long they've been here, right? McDaniel's been there since, 22? I think it was his first year, 21, 22?
I want to say 21.
Yeah, so it's been a few years now where, like, you kind of have an idea of what this offense is for Miami. So from just about any angle you want to look at it, not what you're looking for. Outside, Christian Barr, I almost feel bad because, like, Christian Barmore sacked. That's an incredible achievement for a guy that was told that he might never play again to come back just within months and get a sack. I wish it came in a better game.
You're right, 22 on
McDaniel. It could get a little more applause. But, outside of that, just really not what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think all of us would like to just see this team on an upward trajectory, not necessarily even wins and losses, almost just eye tests and just feel for how this team looks. And it felt like for the last month or so, going back to that win against the Jets, but you have the Jets, you have an overtime loss to the Titans, you have a nice win there in Chicago, and then a competitive loss, I would call it, against the Rams. It felt like they were at least playing competitive, competent football in those weeks for the most part. We certainly broke down some coaching miscues in Tennessee, mainly, I would say, with the wind and, all that kind of stuff. Like, that wasn't a great performance down in Nashville, but at least they got it to overtime and it was competitive, and Drake Maye had his moments. All we're looking for is that upward trajectory and that feeling that they're making progress and they're getting better. And this certainly felt like a Category 5 hurricane down in Miami, where all of that just went out the door with all the different issues. But I think the football minutia that I wanted to talk about, one of the biggest things that I took away from this game, and I get that the penalties on the offensive line, you can't just throw that out. We were just talking about this actually with Campbell and how much we care about the false starts that he's been called for. The penalties you can't just throw out. Like, that's part of the equation. That's part of details. That's part of being buttoned up and being ready to go. But at the same time, I do want to talk about the actual execution once the ball was properly snapped and they weren't false starting or whatever the case may be. And one of the big things that I've seen on film over the last 2 weeks, and some of this is, I would say, from a Rams perspective, this is just sort of how they play defense. Like this, I wouldn't say that what they did against the Patriots was all that surprising, and that to me is why when the Rams blitzed Drake Maye, we had a lot of really positive clips to show from that game of Drake Maye beating the blitz. Obviously, the crosser to Pop Douglas was probably the number one throw against the blitz, but it felt like in that game they were prepared to see the blitz and they were prepared for this exotic, aggressive Rams defense with a really great pass rush. And we praised AVP last week for their plan to get the ball out of Drake's hands and how to beat that pressure and all that kind of stuff. I kind of felt like this week against Miami that it took them by surprise how much they tried to heat up Drake and tried to blitz him. And I don't necessarily know if that was what they anticipated on the game plan. So this sort of goes back to one of the coaching things that we talk about a lot, adjusting, during the game. When you see that this is how they're going to try to play him, they blitzed him 15 times in this game, and they had a lot of success with it. So if you see that this is what they're doing, and this is sort of their plan once that game declares, then you need to adjust to it and adjust quickly. But the problem was, and coinciding with the fact that I think they got taken a little bit by surprise by the aggressiveness of the Dolphins defense, you give up 24 straight points in the second quarter, and then it's blouses, right? So even if they go into halftime and make adjustments, it's kind of too late at that point. But just starting there with the blitzes, then I want to break down some of the things I saw in the film with why they struggled against it. To me, it's just another thing with this coaching staff that I have noticed, and that is when they go into games and they have a good plan and they sort of get what they're expecting and what they practiced against all week, you see some good things from this team on both sides of the ball. But when they go into a game with a bad game plan, it's just going to be a bad game. Like there's no adjustments and there's no real, counterpunch or plan B when things don't go right.
And specifically when it comes to those blitzes, Drake Maye talked about this morning, was blitzing corners, blitzing safeties, blitzing from the second, third level. And to your point, there were a couple times in the first half corners came in, and I know there was one earlier one where Jalen Ramsey came in unblocked, nobody counted for him, nobody saw it, and I think Drake Maye threw it away, maybe he took the sack, whatever. Ramsey then comes in on a very similar look, unblocked later in the game, which is the play that leads to the interception.
Yeah.
So that's it. And again, Drake talked about it this morning that he's seeing more of that now. Teams are trying to get him to throw hot. Teams are blitzing from unorthodox places in order to try to catch him off guard. And that's something that, usually you look at, okay, they're starting to bring corners. Let's leave the back end, or let's be aware of this. And that wasn't there, and you see that in real time. You see it tangibly where it leads to a turnover because Jalen Ramsey, on a look that had already beat them once, is allowed to replicate that.
Yeah, so you're gonna love this, because this is exactly one of the, besides the clock management, game management stuff. This to me is exactly one of your critiques about these types of offenses, these West Coast offenses. So I've gone around the locker room today, actually, and was asking around to guys on the offensive side of the ball, like, how do you guys handle blitz pressure? Because everybody does it a little bit differently in terms of systems, right? Like some systems do it one way, other systems do it another. So I've seen a lot of this, and I myself included, hand up, I thought the same thing about, for example, the throw over the middle of the field to Pop Douglas that Drake threw behind Douglas. A lot of people watch that and say, well, shouldn't Douglas settle here, right? Like, shouldn't he stop his route and settle down and kind of sit down right there in the middle of the field instead of continuing running the slant? There was another play later on in the game where they blitzed two guys from the field, including the nickel slot corner, and Hunter Henry has a crossing route, and he just runs the crossing route. So in some offenses, they would sight adjust, right? So like when that blitz comes, the receiver there on that side of the field, if you're lined up, like, just let's say you're lined up in the slot and the slot corner blitzes, you would just pop right up for the quarterback and make yourself available.
Right, because you want to give him a chance. You want to replace the blitz, throw the ball into the blitz.
Right, exactly. So some offenses, like the Patriots offenses of yesteryear, with Josh McDaniels and Bill O'Brien, would have programmed sight adjustments into those concepts that they run to adjust the route to the pressure. In this offense, they have one route that's predetermined before the ball is even snapped based off the concept that is the quote-unquote hot route, right? So it doesn't adjust is my point. So they don't run quite as much conversion site adjustment or like option style plays like that, where you might see that in the Josh McDaniels, Bill O'Brien, Charlie Weiss offense. The Patriots don't do that anymore in this West Coast system. So to kind of unpack that even further, last year in the Super Bowl, because this isn't just about like the Patriots and Drake Maye and Alex Van Pelt, and you're going to love this. Last year in the Super Bowl, Steve Spagnuolo blitzed the crap out of Brock Purdy, right? Like that was sort of the game plan from Kansas City, was to just heat up Purdy and just blitz. And the reason why Spagnuolo did that is because he knew that Kyle Shanahan and this offense, they were just going to run the play.
Right.
They weren't going to audible. There weren't going to be sight adjustments. There weren't going to be any changes. They were just going to run the play. And so what Spagnuolo did, which is exactly what Miami did in this game, is they blitz from the second and third level of the defense to make the quarterback hot, and then they were dropping players off the line of scrimmage into those hot zones, right, where you just are expecting and anticipating that that's where the designated predetermined hot route is going to be. So as we get into, this with this Alex Van Pelt offense, it's the same thing in the Super Bowl last year of why the Niners offense struggled against the Chiefs defense, was because Purdy is just kind of left without a real answer against pressure. So it's one way of doing it. I think in this offense, the key for most of them is that they want to set the protection pre-snap so that you're not hot. Right. But that's obviously not always going to happen. And, one guy said to me, when you're caught with your pants down because you set the protection, but they bring too many guys and you're hot, the blitz is coming. We have one predetermined route that Drake is supposed to throw hot to this player.
Right.
Now, there's always different ways to do things. And this system and this West Coast offense, it's been around since the 80s for a reason, right? Like it's been successful in the NFL. So it's not to sit here and say that it can't be successful. But I do think, in terms of you guys listening and also myself, like we need to change our perception of, this guy should be changing this route, right? Because that doesn't necessarily exist in this offense.
Let me ask you this. How do you as a quarterback or you as an offense beat that? When they're covering up that hot route and still blitzing elsewhere, how do you beat it?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And I think it's one that certainly Shanahan and I think other guys in this tree have had trouble with, right, of finding those answers. When you see that pressure, like you're not in this offense, you're not supposed to like completely audible and change the play. You're not supposed to sight adjust. So like, how do you beat those things? This is, I would say, probably the biggest flaw in this type of offense in the way that they run things now. So
can I answer my own question in part?
Yeah.
Skill. You just have to have guys that, all right, your hot receiver's not going to be open. Do you have another guy that is winning quickly one-on-one on another route?
Yeah.
And that's obviously, when you talk about the Patriots, it's something that's a need.
Yeah. So, you look at the one over the middle, just to go back and, give examples. Like the one over the middle to Pop Douglas, he has a slant. He's running a slant. And so they move the back over, right? Because, again, remember, if they recognize blitz threats, they want to make sure at all costs that they are doing everything they can to make sure that the quarterback is not hot, right? They don't want the defense to be able to make the quarterback hot.
And what that means is just to unblocked blitzer, and I know that kind of sounds, why wouldn't you block the blitzer? Well, if you recognize that there's a 6-man rush coming and you're supposed to have 5 guys in the pattern and you only have 5 blocking, now somebody's hot, or 7 if you leave one in, 7 on 6, things like that.
So this is why I wanted to bring this up, because there's a lot of heat right now on the offensive line.
Yeah.
And understandably so. You brought up Chop Robinson earlier, who had 11 quarterback pressures in this game. 9 of them were on Trey Jacobs.
And that was not schemed. That was not blitzing. That was just one-on-one wins.
Right. We're talking about one-on-one wins when we're talking about that. But I think a lot of these pressures came unblocked, like you were talking about, free runners at the quarterback. And
specifically defensive backs.
So on the play to Douglas on the slant, which I think is being talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Drake Maye actually moves Ramondre over from left to right. So he goes from next to Drake in the gun on the left to next to Drake on the gun on the right, because they see that they're 3-over-2 on the right-hand side of the offensive line. So now they're 3-on-3. But if that extra DB blitzes, now they're 4-over-3. So now they're hot, right? And it's on the quarterback to get the ball out at that point. Basically, to think about it this way, the extra rusher is the quarterback's responsibility.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
It's not the blocker's responsibility. So when you see these guys running free through the line of scrimmage, don't blame the offensive line all the time for that. Sometimes they just don't have the numbers to block these people. So Jordan Poyer,
and that's going to happen in any offense.
Yeah, so Jordan Poyer comes, right, and he blitzes, and then Pop Douglas is just running a slant. He's not supposed to sit, right? Like, he's just supposed to run the slant, and Drake's under pressure. The free runner's coming right at him, and unfortunately, he just misses the throw, right?
Yeah.
He just missed the throw. And he said it after the game, I missed him. Like, he wore it.
That's what happens with pressure. You're less accurate.
Yeah,
unless you're Tua.
A lot of people think that he was falling on the sword for his teammate, but I genuinely don't think he was after talking to the guys today.
I think he was more last week talking about the interception than he was in this one. It was a bad throw.
Yeah.
He just missed the throw.
Yeah, so that was a big problem for them in this game. How they move forward, I think, is a really good question for Alex Van Pelt, because look, if teams see things on film that are successful, they're going to just replicate those things. They're just going to keep doing it until the Patriots prove that they can answer it. And this Colts defense that they play this week, which I do want to talk about the Colts a little bit, they are a zone-based defense. They good old Gus Bradley just still sticking to the Seattle 3 10 years later, right? Like he has not changed his stripes at all. So they don't blitz a ton. So my expectation is, based off of just the film and the numbers and stuff that we all dive into, they're probably not going to look at this game plan and say we're going to expect a lot of blitz pressure. Well, if they run a bunch of fire zone on Sunday, blitz zone, then the Patriots have got to be ready for that, and they have to have better answers to what they were given last week against Miami, who did run a lot of what I would call fire zone or blitz zone. So that's the offense. Like, to me, that was the game for the offense. Penalties was obviously number one. Number two was finding answers to pressure and to blitz pressure in particular. That third down play to Pop Douglas, that was kind of the game in a lot of ways, because the defense wasn't stopping Miami.
Yeah.
And once they gave up once they missed that opportunity, and if you see it on the film, like, if he hits Pop Douglas in stride there, then that is a house call. Like, there's, the safeties are widening. It's split safety. They're going out like this. The middle of the field is wide AF open, and if he just hits them in stride, like, that's a huge play. That was sort of the game right there, it felt like to me at that moment.
I get why you want to bring up schematically the issues with the pressures, but I do think it is worth talking about the offensive line too.
Yeah.
And the issues they had, specifically the tackles. Look, penalties are inexcusable, especially the pre-snap penalties. I mean, you can't have that.
Yep.
You can't. What was it, 4 or 5 false starts between the two of them?
Yeah.
Just too many, and that's why I know you don't want to do the draft, so we don't have to go all the way down this road. But I think I texted you during the game, like, get over Tet McMillan, because this game is a reminder that tackle is their biggest need. I know some people had gotten caught up in what Vidarian Lowe had done through the past couple weeks, and he had been decent, but he was kind of punching above his weight there. And I think that was the continuity of the offensive line helping out. I think some of it was the opponents as well. But you kind of see where that floor is, and that floor is not a starting caliber tackle. So at right tackle, Devontae Jacobs obviously wasn't great either. I think over there, you kind of hope Caden Wallace shows you something. We'll see when he gets back. He wasn't at practice today. But if they can get him back and he shows you something, you go into next year with him as kind of your hopeful starting right tackle. But left tackle, issue number one, because there really isn't anybody else in the pipeline either. And between the penalties, not just pressure, but I mean blow-bys. And I don't know if that's a technical term. It's what I use.
Yeah.
It basically, I mean, it's what it sounds like. Does the defensive lineman blow by you? A non-competitive rep where it's, not even, all right, he beat me, but it was after a second or two, so I had a chance. And, I mean, it wasn't just on pass plays. The first run play of the game, and I know it's designed where Lowe's sort of pulling, but the guy sort of hits him on the side, and he doesn't do much to react. And we see them run that drill at practice where they hit the blocking sled from the side.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of thought that's an interesting drill. I'm like, how often does this come up? First play of the game.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that looked like, and no resistance. And, Jacobs, too, obviously, either really quick wins or just outright blow-bys by Chop Robinson. Yeah. And it's just a reminder that it was good for a few weeks. I think that was more the exception. I think what we saw Sunday, if they were to run it back another year with either these guys or both these guys,
oh, no.
Like Sunday, I think is more what you can expect.
Yeah, so just quickly,
maybe not quite that bad, but
just like quickly on the actual evaluating the actual play on the field from Sunday. I thought Jacobs was much worse when the ball was snapped. Like Lowe's problems were mostly the penalties.
Yeah,
he had a couple pressures allowed in this game, and I dinged him for a few run blocks, but like it wasn't. They didn't really run the ball.
The run blocking to me with him was worse than the pass blocking.
Yeah, maybe I didn't run the ball a ton traditionally.
Yeah.
Because of the score, so I didn't really like overanalyze some of the run blocking in this game, but obviously on the other side at right tackle, like to me Jacobs, his bigger issue was actually executing blocks in the pass game, and I think the biggest thing that you see with him is he just plays with a really, really short corner because he doesn't get out of his stance really quickly. He just doesn't really get a lot of initial kick out of his jump set, and that causes him to give up the edge in a hurry. And when you face dynamic rushers like Chop Robinson, who have that speed and that explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, every week that's just a huge mismatch for Trey Jacobs. Whenever there's a player like that, that's a screamer off the edge, I'd much rather him play like a bull rusher, because those guys aren't going to threaten his corner as much. When you play somebody like a Chop Robinson, when you play someone like this week, if they, he rushes over the left tackle most of the time, but if they flip Latu Latu this week for Indianapolis and they put him over Trey Jacobs, like that's another one of those, young screamers coming off the edge that is going to give him problems. So the reason why I don't get too caught up, I guess, like in why I got more into the scheme with the offensive line is because I just don't expect these guys to be back in these spots next year.
Well, I think people had started more so with Lowe, because with Jacobs, like Caden Wallace is still here. I think with Lowe, because people get so enticed by Travis Hunter, Tet McMillan, Will Johnson, even Abdul Carter.
He's serviceable.
Right, they had started talking themselves into that, and it's like this is a good reminder of, well, there will be games like this. If you stick with them, you can't have that. And I start to worry about here what it's going to look like over the last 5 weeks. I know you roll your eyes at this.
Yeah.
But we'll get to Drake. Is he going to start developing bad habits? Because he had to change the way he played because of the tackle play. And honestly, the play calling, it felt like to me, because we saw this in September. We hadn't seen it in a while, but we saw it in September. The play calling was impacted by the tackle play. And I think the play calling got overly conservative at times out of a reason, out of necessity to protect Drake Maye, because the line wasn't doing it. So that was just, I came in last week after the Rams game saying, if you're somebody who wants Patriots to take Will Johnson or take Travis Hunter as a corner, like this is your week to be loud. This is your week to speak up. That's what that looked like on the field. I hope you took advantage last week, because this week was back to reality in terms of what their biggest need actually is.
Yeah, and I guess, just to piggyback off that, I just don't necessarily feel like harping on or kind of killing the current tackles is like worth it. Because, and I'm not like saying that's what you're doing. I just like these guys are just not going to be there next year.
Right.
I think I feel pretty comfortable saying that they're not going to go into the season week 1 expecting Vidarian Lowe to be their starting left tackle.
He might still be here.
They've had some terrible luck, and I'm not saying that to excuse the personnel department, but Obviously, like we got to this point with Vidarian Lowe being the starting left tackle, so anything could happen, like injuries, Chukwuekorfor quitting, like whatever the case may be. Like we got here, this year, so I'm not going to say it's totally impossible to get there next year, but I would assume that you're drafting a left tackle. Maybe Caden Wallace you give him some leash at right tackle to see what he can do.
A top 100 pick on him. You got to see it, and that's why hopefully he gets back. Drake Maye said today he'll be back soon. Hopefully he gets back sooner rather than later, so you can get. I mean, they got 5 games left, right? 4 games, 5 games. Say that's a decent enough sample size. We're going into next year. You should, at the very least, I think you'll know if he's totally not it in 5 games. You may not know for sure that he's the long-term answer, but I think you can see enough in 5 games to say, all right, it's worth going into the season and seeing what we have in him, and then maybe you get, Matt Dolph brought this up to me. I thought it was a good way to put it, like the Austin Hooper of tackles in free agency who can just kind of be there. So he's a young guy. You're gonna have a young guy on the left side to just kind of be available to fill in where he's needed.
That's sort of where I was going to go with it next. It's a good way to put it. I think we're back into sign one, draft one.
Soto, baby. I appreciate everybody who tweeted that at me.
Yeah,
this week. That was 2 years ago, right?
No, I think that was last year.
No, I think it was 2 years ago.
Oh, was it 2 years ago at that, like, McGlinchey, McGarry
Yeah,
class?
yeah. It was that class.
Yeah.
And then who was it from Georgia? Who's the guy the Steelers took?
Broderick Jones.
Broderick Jones and DeJuan Jones and
Skoronsky, who's a guard.
Skoronsky. That 2 year. Honestly, it was cool seeing so many people. I had to remind myself what it meant.
No,
it was 2 years ago. You guys still remember? I appreciate that.
I definitely think we're back in that territory.
Soto, baby.
And to Matt's point, it's not necessarily to go out there and get a franchise tackle.
Right. That was more about getting 2 starters, so it's a little less.
Yeah. So
that,
can we get a starting tackle in free agency, and then get the guy, probably at left tackle in the draft to round out this line. And then I would also expect, just based off of what the coaching staff has said about him, Cole Strange I think is going to be a factor in the interior next year. David Andrews will be back.
Yeah.
And then Mike Onwenu will obviously still be here. So, like, when you really think about it, Onwenu is probably the only guy on this offensive line that should be starting for this team next year in week 1, and that's my expectation.
On this, currently now playing.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think we're going to see Cole Strange soon, especially because Michael Jordan had a rough game, and we talked about this last week. Michael Jordan, Ben Brown, who's going to lose their job. Ben Brown, I mean, I don't think you're going to put the tape from Ben Brown on the Hall of Fame, but he was fine. Michael Jordan was not. So you look at that.
It's just so much easier, and I'm not trying to take away from the great centers like David Andrews and Jason Kelsey and those guys, but like it's so much easier to scheme around a center.
It is, but looking at that game, who's getting pulled for Cole Strange? Factoring into the left guard is the natural
that's sort
position.
of my point. Like if you're going to have a guy that is kind of a weak link, so to speak, and I'm not ready to pronounce that Cole Strange is not one of those guys, but just saying, like, if you're going to have a guy that is a weak link, then I'd much rather it be at center. Like, at center, you can help, you can chip. Like, not a lot of teams line up guys, like, over the center anymore.
True nose tackle.
Like, it's usually shaded into one of the gaps, in the A gap. So, like, at that point, you have the guard that can, like, give him a bump or, like, something, right? Slide the protection that direction so the center's sliding out to the A gap or whatever. Like, there's so many ways to make life easier on a center. Versus guards that can, and tackles that can really get more isolated and more targeted by teams. And with Michael Jordan, you just see, like, he can't pick up post-line movement. Like, every time they run a stunt over his side of the line of scrimmage on the left-hand side, he's just not picking it up. Like, his eyes are not picking it up, and he's not, passing it off with Vidarian Lowe like he should be. And even the strip sack, I felt like Michael Jordan, I wasn't really sure what he was doing on that play either. Right. He goes with the blitzer, so does Ramondre Stevenson, and they leave Vidarian Lowe with a guy that's shaded inside his inside shoulder trying to leverage that block. Like, good luck with that, right? You're not going to be able to get that blocked that way. So I was surprised. I'm surprised about that a little bit with Jordan, just because he has played in the league. He's a fifth-year guy. Like, he's played some NFL football.
We talked about this in camp. He's like one of the most experienced linemen in terms of being played.
And yet when it comes to like line movement or post snap movement by defensive lines, he just can't pick it up for whatever reason. He just doesn't see it coming. So, yeah, the offensive line we've known is a problem. I still think that a big part of this game plan, though, and this issue with this offense on Sunday had to do with their adjustments and their answers to pressure, which were kind of non-existent for most of this game.
Yeah.
And this is a feather in your cap for these types of offenses, my friend. Like this is not.
I've been trying to tell you.
This is what they do against the West Coast tree.
I've been trying to tell you.
I think the one guy that's like solved it, and I would, maybe this is an off-season thing, but like Andy Reid's kind of solved it.
He's had 20-something years,
maybe
30-something years
he's had
to work
great
on it.
quarterbacks too.
And yeah, he's had Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, so maybe that helps. I don't know, but he's one guy that seems figured out. Let's flip over to the defense. Do you have ups and downs? You told me you didn't do them.
Well, I usually do them on Tuesday, and I just have. I mean, I can do them off the top of my head.
Yeah, unprepared per usual, Marine. Like God, one time. Can you prepare one time?
I'm literally usually. What time is it? It's like 4 o'clock. I'm literally usually doing them right now on Tuesday.
Okay, well we'll get to that in a second. But defensively, look, right now defense is scary, and it's scaring me because they still have some major holes to fill on the offensive side of the football, holes that are going to take high-end resources to fill. Like, you just don't pluck left tackles and wide receiver ones out of thin air. Like, you have to go and invest in those types of players.
Money, draft picks, maybe both if a trade.
So now all of a sudden that we're starting to see some significant holes on the defensive side of the football, you start to think to yourself, well, where are they going to get all these guys, right? So I do think the one benefit that they have, looking at this defense, I came away from this game kind of down on Marcus Jones because he obviously gave up a lot of yards in this game to Jalen Waddle. But when I watched the game back on film, I actually thought the middle of the field was a much bigger problem. Like, Marcus Jones has his limitations. He's always going to be 5'8", right? It's always going to be.
He's a slot corner. Like, that was I thought he was in the right spot more often than the numbers would indicate.
Yeah.
Like, there were 2-3 plays where he's right there and Jalen Waddle just climbs the ladder and goes and gets the football.
Yeah.
Right? I say this all the time. At a certain point, 5'8's 5'8. You can't coach height. So
right.
I think he's a slot corner. I think he's a good slot corner, but I think he's a slot corner, and for 2 years now, they've been 2 non-consecutive years, I guess. They've been trying to play him on the boundary to hedge their
really
depth.
Out of necessity.
Or
right?
out of necessity.
Because they really haven't had anybody
But not
else.
even. And I'm maybe this game's a bad example because the Dolphins have so much speed. But I talked about this last week. Alex Austin has the size to play on the boundary.
Yeah.
Isaiah Bolden maybe doesn't have the and Austin made plays down the stretch last year.
Yep.
Like, we know he's a capable NFL corner. I don't know, he's not an all-pro, but he's a capable NFL corner. Isaiah Bolden we haven't seen, so there's the experience thing, but this is a guy that has athleticism, has size. At what point, like, how many times do you have to see Marcus Jones get mossed? And it's not against Marcus Jones. I think he's being put in a bad spot.
Yeah.
To be like, all right, we're going to give Bolden a shot, or we're going to give Austin a shot.
Yeah, so the way I looked at it with Marcus Jones, too, is, as the game wore on, and I know some of it came in the second half when most people would probably say it was garbage time, but he gave up some plays, and then he made some plays on the ball, too.
He competes.
Yeah, so
he competes.
I had no problem, really, in this game on the whole with what Marcus Jones did. And I had no problems with what Christian Gonzalez did either. I thought
he's a stud.
Yeah, but I thought those two guys at corner were competitive throughout the game. The big issue that they had in this game was, I don't know what's going on with Kyle Duggar. I
mean, you hope it's just the ankle.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on with him mentally. His eyes were in the wrong place this entire game. His head was spinning. He had no idea which way was up. Right, like, it was a bizarre Kyle Duggar
so
performance.
what you hope is you'll hear this guys sometimes talk about this when you have a lower body injury, something that's going to impact your ability to move, to pop, explode, right, to change direction. You start overthinking the anticipation because you can't read and react in the same speed you normally do. So you try to get ahead of things, and then to do that, you have to gamble, and that can cost you big time. So you hope that's what it is with Kyle Duggar. That just his ankle's not 100%. He's jumping the gun, and the reads aren't right. Like, that's what you hope. If it's just too complex for him, which you go back a couple years, very instinctive player, which is why it's so surprising. But if his ankle really is limiting him that much, maybe he's out there because, again, out of necessity, they're so banged up. But that was my first thought. It just felt like he was maybe pressing a bit much to try to compensate for maybe not being 100% physically.
Yeah, so I had him for, I think, 76 yards allowed in coverage, and I felt like he was responsible, or at least had a hand in all 4 touchdowns that the Dolphins scored in this game. So his head was spinning in it. And it wasn't just plays where he was actually the primary target either. It was plays where he was playing zones over the middle or help defense over the middle of the field, and he just wasn't in the right places the entire game. And then you also go back to the fact that continually still that they have issues at linebacker and coverage. And we've talked about this for how many years going back now, probably since we started covering this team,
right?
That their linebackers aren't good in space.
They
and
miss
their
Mac
linebackers
Wilson.
Don't cover well. So, Jelani Tavai, Sione Takitaki, Christian Ellis, they put these guys on the field. And these teams, guys that these teams are smart, they are just stretching those guys out, and they're just attacking them in the middle of the numbers, right between the numbers. So you look at this game from Tua, he did it. Like, that was where he did most of his damage. It wasn't on the corners, right? Like, it was a lot of it was on linebackers and safeties. And so now we just add that into the mix of, they probably do need a true second boundary or outside corner.
Yeah. That was Matt's take. It wasn't tackle. It was the Austin Hooper of corners.
Okay, well, that's also true. Now that
to which I said Jason McCourty 2019.
Yeah, that I think you can find in free agency legitimately. Like there'll be guys available. I don't know if all of them will hit free agency, but DJ Reed, Javarius Ward, Carlton Davis, like they have the money to go out and pay one of those
Carlton
guys.
Davis is great, and I was a big fan of Carlton Davis when Brady was in Tampa. I thought he was like going to break out as top 5
really
corner.
Physical guy.
Not quite the player he was, but opposite Gonzalez, I think would give you enough.
Yeah, so they have him, or they have that need. Then they have what I would just call in general, and I were talking about this on PU a little bit, it's like a philosophical need as much as it is a personnel need to me. Like, how do you want, like, what's a Patriot linebacker now? Like, is a Patriot linebacker now still going to be Jelani Tavai, Jawan Bentley, 250, 255?
Well, the weird
like,
thing is
that what we're still doing?
Bentley just got good at covering guys at 260.
Yeah, his instincts and, like, his reads and stuff like that really
You're
improved.
probably not going to just find that. Like, you're going to – that's something you have to develop. Now, this is – I know you said you didn't want to go back to the draft, and I keep going back to the draft. I think it's a really good linebacker class, especially with these kind of guys. So maybe they find that guy, but like I think the guy they want is a 250-pound guy that can cover. Those guys aren't falling off trees.
Yeah,
like you gotta, even if you like Fred Warner, right? Fred Warner,
but he's only like 230, right? He's not.
Is he? I thought he was like 245.
He's not that big, relatively speaking. Like obviously he's an NFL linebacker, so I'm not saying he's a small guy. But like, Fred Warner is, a unique specimen.
Oh, I thought he was. I thought he was like 245. He's 230.
No, yeah, he's got that. He's just a freak, right? So you look at that, and I just think this is a big question. I think it's important for us to push things forward as always, and look ahead with this team, especially in the state they're in right now. I just wonder, from an evaluation standpoint, like when Gerard goes to Elliott Wolf and says, like, this is what I need. Like,
right.
Are we still going with the Belichick prototypes? Because what I see defensively, and I'm willing to chalk the Duggar game up to one really bad game for now.
Bad week last week.
But
too.
Just in general, what I'm seeing with the defense is that all these tweeners, like all these hybrid type players,
money backers,
Tavai, Duggar, Mapu, even, who I think could be a useful player if used correctly.
Well, you're still banging the table for Marte Mapu at linebacker. 2 years later.
But like all these players that that Belichick brought in, that he kind of had that secret sauce of like, I know exactly how to use Jelani Tavai, right? Like
right.
I know exactly what he is. I know what his weaknesses are. I know exactly how we're going to cover him up. Like, I don't know if they have that kind of coaching anymore. And they might need guys that are more not Belichick system fits, which is like this own thing, but like just traditional system fits in the type of defense they want to run.
Beyond that, just well-rounded. Because what they would do, Jelani Tavai, Kyle Van Noy is a great example of this.
Yeah.
Jawan Bentley early in his career, again, he rounded his game out the last few years. He deserves a ton of credit for that. But, like, a lot of the Belichick linebacker thing, it felt like, was predicated on, because they would keep a ton of linebackers on the roster, and it was, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. You get like, all right, this guy can't cover, but he can shoot a gap. Or this guy, can't shoot a gap, but he's really good on the edge or whatever. And it's like, we're going to have you do this one thing. And maybe some of it is just personnel. They're so banged up, but it feels like they now are asking linebackers to have a more comprehensive role, and you need a different kind of player for that. You need a guy, maybe you can't get a guy that's elite at one thing. You got to take a little bit less from the one trait and find a guy that's more of a well-rounded player. The thing is, those well-rounded players are usually a little bit on the smaller side. So if you still want that 255-pound middle linebacker, that guy's probably going to be lacking in coverage. So, okay, you want to go find the 230-pound linebacker to spell him in coverage. You want to go find Mack Wilson. You can do that. But then you have to be willing to make those substitutions and have those different packages, which, again, it just feels like this year, and maybe it's because they have no bodies, but this year it feels more like they're at, like, asking Jelani Tavai to cover. He wasn't asked to do that the last few years. People say, why did Jelani Tavai get so much worse in one season? I don't think he got worse. He's just being asked to do things he wasn't asked to do the last 2 years, and they're not strengths of his. And he's doing less of the things that are strengths, but they maybe need him doing it because when Bentley goes down, who else is playing off the ball? They tried McMillan. He wasn't playing well. They've moved on to Christian Ellis, and that's worked to an extent. He's been better than Tavai was, but maybe it's not necessarily – maybe the prototype is just the well-rounded guy. It's not a specialist.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it, and it's just something that I've been thinking about with Mayo, DeMarcus Covington, assuming that Covington, who, I'll say this about the entire coaching staff. Gerard Mayo needs to go into this offseason with his eyes wide open about his coaching staff. I remember back, and I'm sure you probably remember this at least a little bit, when they hired their coaches, one of the first things that he said at his press conference when they introduced the coordinators was that he might not get it right on the first try. Right? Yep. Like there might be some coaches where he didn't get it right on the first try. And I just look at that across the board. Like I'm not trying to single anybody out. I look at it across the board on the staff. Like it just might not be the answer. Right? Like you have to move on quickly in this league because really I would say after the year that they've had this year, assuming that they don't go and rattle off 5 straight wins, which I think we can all safely assume, they have one more year before it really starts to get testy with Gerard Mayo, right? Like he's got one more season next year. They're going to draft high. They're going to spend a bunch of money on players. And then they have to start having some results here. And they have to start winning some games. So if you're Gerard Mayo, you don't have all this leash to carry DeMarcus Covington because he's a guy you liked with Bill and he's your guy and you kind of came up together and this, that, and the other thing. If he's not getting the job done, then you got to move on because your job's on the line too. And I look at them philosophically, defensively, and I do think they need to answer that difficult question going into next offseason and have this conversation between Gerard and Elliott Wolf specifically of, how do we want to build this defense? And you might have to be a little bit more systemic. Like it might not be an amoeba game plan defense where everything changes constantly week to week. And these guys are hybrids and this guy's a adjuster, as they like to used to call Jelani Tavai, Like you might have to have, like some of these other coaches and these other trees, the Fangio tree, the Seattle 3 guys, like that's just the system and they just run it. They'll have their little game plan wrinkles here and there, but they have their types of players, they have their system and they stick to that and they just try to get really, really good and really, really good personnel for what they want to do defensively instead of just being the Belichick defense. Like, well, Bill's not here anymore, so you're not the Belichick defense anymore.
And that means maybe redefining players. So while you're watching LSU, Harold Perkins, linebacker.
Of course. Gotta make it about the draft. Gotta make it about the draft.
You know it.
All right, a couple more things that I just got to get off my chest is I'm sorry for, it's an abbreviated show here today, so we were running out of time. So I'm just going to stick with this game from Sunday against Miami for the most part. And maybe we'll throw some ups and downs in there. Can you do that? But I have one more thing I want to get off my chest. So the last thing, just because, I already took down their entire, hot system in answer to pressure because that Miami took it down. So I didn't do it first, right? The other thing that really has irked me all season long, and I feel like a broken record talking about this, their play action concepts do not work. And their play action game, it does not marry the run actions do not marry to the routes. Okay, so I'll give you an example. They ran a play action play from pistol, which there we go. This is what I've been waiting to see. They pulled the guard from pistol, and they get the linebackers to bite. They get the linebackers up into the line of scrimmage, and then they run 2 routes on the outside off of that run. So think about it this way. When you run that guard pull, right, you're trying to get the linebackers up.
Right, vacate the middle.
So you're trying to vacate the middle of the field. They don't run a single route into the middle of the field. Nothing, no crosser, no seam, no post,
drag,
no slant, no nothing. So Miami runs the exact same concept. 2 in the pistol, pull the guard, and they hit Jonnu Smith on a little shallow crosser going across the middle. And you just see that juxtaposition of like what it looks like when it's designed correctly and what it looks like when the Patriots run it. And the Patriots are running it with an out and a 9-stop outside the numbers. Like how does that you're trying to displace linebackers and then you're throwing at corners, right? Like that just doesn't make any sense. And Drake Maye, hits the top of his drop and is just like, where am I supposed to go with this football, right? Like the corners, they don't have any run pass conflict. So they're just covering their guys, right? There's no pull. There's no conflict in the defense. So the play action pass game just has not married up all season long. And it feels like they're just leaving yards on the field because of that. And it just doesn't make much sense. Like how many times did we see, I talk about this every week, and he's going to be in here at some point this afternoon, so I'll bring him up. How many times did we see pull the guard, play action pass, Gronk up the seam? Like, that was a Patriots staple for a decade.
Yep.
Right? How many times do we see that in this offense? Never. Never, because they don't run those types of concepts. They have 2 tight ends that are capable receivers. Like, they have 2 tight ends that have been good.
First time in a while. Like, this is one of the best Patriots. This is probably the best Patriots tight end year since Gronk retired. No.
Yeah. It's just that piece of it is really has infuriated me to no end. And the last thing, just to go on the defense and make this just the whole, S sandwich.
I can talk special teams after if you want.
And I'll let you finish with the special teams. Once again, they're playing Miami, I would say Miami's probably the fastest offense in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
Guess how many snaps in base defense the Patriots played in this game?
Probably around, I'm going to guess around 40%.
Yeah, 25 snaps in base defense.
Out of what, like 60 plays?
Yeah. Against Miami.
Yeah.
Against these receivers, against old friend Jonnu Smith, who, for all of his faults with the Patriots, is an athletic, explosive tight end.
I think we're kind of learning what went wrong between the Patriots and Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, and they keep rolling base defense out there. And that goes back to me to like this philosophy thing that, every time we've asked DeMarcus Covington about this, they want to stop the run. Like it's a philosophical
which they did
effort
do
to stop the run. It was the one thing they did well in this game.
2.7 yards per carry for Miami?
Yeah, that they stopped the run. But you can stop the run all day long. If your linebackers can't cover, then they're going to just get you in base defense, and they're just going to throw the ball into your base defense.
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about. If this is what you want your identity to be, you need smaller, more athletic linebackers.
Yeah.
Like smaller. When I say smaller, that sounds counterintuitive to stopping the run. I guess the better way to phrase that would be, if this you want your identity to be, we're going to play a lot of base, so we're stout up front, you can't run on us, then you need quicker linebackers because teams are going to try to throw at that look, and you need linebackers that can hold up in coverage. So the linebackers that can hold up in coverage are usually smaller, so you need guys that are overly physical and play above their size. So maybe that's the new Patriots linebacker. Now, what I just described is a very, very, very good play. Everybody, this guy's really quick and he plays physically. It's a great player. Those guys aren't easy to find, and it's probably as much a developmental thing as just drafting them. But if they want to play base, again, you need guys that can hold their own in coverage.
Okay, take us home with special teams.
This was not a great special teams game. They set up Joey Sly for a 45-yard field goal. He doinks that.
Doink.
You had a shank-ish from Bryce Baringer after they botched another end-of-half situation. And I still don't know what happened on that first punt where Malik Washington, it's not a fair catch. He's just telling people to get away. And Schooler's like standing right next to him but doesn't tackle him.
Yeah.
Yeah, just no massive F-ups, but there were enough hiccups that it stood out.
So basically what we're saying is that this entire game was, let's just burn the tape.
So I've been using the Jets game, the first Jets game, as a barometer for, especially when it comes to the coaching staff, as like the worst game of the year. And I think they've passed that because the Jets game, not to make excuses, but it was a short week, and we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough for the coaching staff on their first ever short week. You had a full week against a team you're used to playing. You know what to expect. You already played them once this year. And to come out looking that unprepared, Gerard Mayo's talked about a lack of focus, which to me goes back to preparation. There's no excuse for it.
Okay, I'm going to rattle off my ups and downs because you didn't do them, so we can just...
I mean, I know what they are. I have them written down.
So, my number...
I'll tell you if you miss any.
I did one offense and one defense because I wasn't giving them three for ups.
Fair enough.
Okay. My number one up in this game on offense was Mike Onwenu. I thought he was the only offensive lineman that had a good game in this game, really. I mean, Ben Brown was fine, but they didn't challenge him much. But I had Mike Onwenu with a hurry. He did get called for a hold. That was his one blemish, I would say, in this game. But he had 4 standout run blocks. Like, early on, they actually had some run game success. They just couldn't run the ball because of the score. And Onwenu was moving people and was doing some really standout work in the run game. I thought last week was better. This week was better again.
Yeah.
So now that he's settled back in at right guard, I think we're starting to go on a little bit of an upward trajectory with Big Mike, which is good to see.
I'll throw Ramondre Stevenson in there as an up. Like you said, they didn't run the ball a ton, but he wasn't running this way. He wasn't running this physically coming off that foot injury. And the last 2 games, I think he's gotten much more in a form. He's looking like the guy he looked like in September. So there's an up for you.
So my number one up for the defense, my only up for the defense, Anthony Jennings. Their one good thing that they did in this game was stop the run on either side of the football. I had him for 3 stuffs in this game. Set the edge against a team that wants to get to the edge in the run game. Did a really nice job. Can't block him with a tight end in the run game. They tried to do that a couple times. It did not go well for Miami. So even though he's another one of these guys like we were talking about earlier, like he's a role-specific player. You don't want him on the field on 3rd down if you have a really good pass rush. But in his role, 1st and 2nd down defense, he's been very good this year.
Among the best in the league at that.
Yeah.
I'll go Christian Barmore. I kind of talked about it before. Just having the sack, getting back to that point, I think is an incredible accomplishment by him, by the medical staff here. And, you know, again, I wish it actually kind of came to a big-ish moment in the game. Because they get that stop that's at the start of the half, and it's like, all right, you're only down 3 scores. Can you get a quick touchdown? Didn't play out that way. But good for him for getting the sack. There are a couple other times where he sort of popped, like, starting to win. He talked last week after the game about needing to get back into football shape, which takes a couple of weeks. I thought he looked just, like, physically, athletically. There was a big jump from last week to this week, which is encouraging because, you know, he's that much closer to getting back. I don't think he's at 100% right now. I wouldn't expect him to be at 100%. But I think, I don't know if you agree, I think that there was a noticeable jump from last week to this week.
Maybe a little bit in terms of his motor and, like, his activity. I still don't see, like, the explosiveness and power that we're used to seeing with Christian Barmore. Like, we're used to seeing Christian Barmore snap reaction right into guys and just denting the pocket.
But it looked last week, I guess, like after each snap, it looked like he'd been on the field for 40. And this week, it felt like a motor's a good way to put it. Like snap to snap, he was more competitive.
Okay, to the downs, that's all you get for ups.
Yeah.
To the downs, obviously Kyle Duggar was number one. Yeah. We've already gone over that. Number 2 for me was I really couldn't. Like, I could have made this a whole list.
Well, sorry to go back. Christian Gonzalez deserves an up. I mean, he was really good against
He was really good. He was good.
Remember last year?
Really good. He was good.
Remember last year we kind of just took Barmore out of ups and downs because he was just every week. I think Christian Gonzalez is just like we're putting him in the ups.
Yeah, he was really good. You know, they obviously threw away from him, and teams are just going to continue to do that. And why would you test Christian Gonzalez when you could just test a linebacker,
right? Exactly,
or a safety on this Patriots defense? So Kyle Duggar was number 1 down. Number 2 down was DeMontre Jacobs, Vidarian Lowe, and Michael Jordan. You ready for these two numbers?
Yeah.
The three of those Patriots offensive linemen allowed 5 sacks and 16 quarterback pressures in this game combined.
Excessive.
16, 1-6 between 3 guys on the offensive line. All 3 of them struggled bigly in this game with different things. And so I put all 3 of them together on the downs list.
Yeah, I would have had the tackles. I guess you want to throw Jordan in there too, but that was as bad tackle plays you're going to see. Is that right up there? I mean, we all remember that Eagles practice, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we saw at the Eagles practice.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even include the 9 penalties on the offensive line too. I
Include the
probably
penalties.
Probably could have. And
how about it? And it wasn't on the offensive line. An offensive offsides or an offensive neutral zone infraction.
Yeah,
like that's when you know. Like, and that's on coaching again. But that's when you know you're just not ready to play.
Okay, really quickly because we got a rail here.
Yeah.
Number 3 down for me. This one I don't feel like we're not talking about enough. Kayshon Boutte
That's a good one.
ran 34 routes in this game and caught 1 pass for 6 yards.
He has fallen off the last couple of weeks. It was nice to see him get going.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he can't get back to it, but this was his big problem going back to when he got here last year in his first training camp. Consistency.
Yeah.
He would flash for windows, and then he would disappear for windows. Now, he had about as long sustained success as we've seen from him, but we're starting to see him fade back the other way, and you see the impact on the offense. Drake Maye has had some of his lowest average depth of targets.
They don't have an X receiver. Like
They don't have a guy to go down the field.
He's literally their starting X receiver, and they get no production out of that spot.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
might be
big
time. I
problem.
know I sound like a broken record with this. It might be time to give Javon Baker more of a look. I don't
Yeah.
think that's going to happen, but it might be time.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's show. And next week, on Thursday of next week, back to normal time, the full 2 hours. And I got some homework to do. I know you're excited. So
Please tweet at it. He doesn't think Ursery is worth watching for just the first round discussion.
man.
It's a 5th guy. I'm asking you to watch a 5th guy. You watch him against Penn State, then you also get to watch little Abdul Carter.
I have to
You're
take
filled
like
in there.
I can't spend my entire bye week watching film. I got to take a little bit of a break.
I could give you a
okay?
list of 10 guys.
I
I'm giving
gotta
you one
take
guy.
some time off during the bye week. So I am going to watch a handful of guys. I've already started Will Campbell today, who was just terrific. By the way, we don't have time to go unpack it, but
This was the take from the beginning of the show.
He was that guy is just excellent. Like if his arms are 33 inches plus, I'm running the card up. I'm running the dang card up. That guy was phenomenal player.
Campbell, Banks, Ursery, McMillan, Hunter. That's
yeah,
your list.
so
I guess
watch
Hunter's
that
2
list.
players kind
so
of.
next Thursday, since we don't have a game to talk about that they're going to be playing in that week, we will discuss my preliminary list, my wish list for the Patriots in the first round of the NFL draft.
Love it.
Love it. So we'll see you guys then. Signing off, Alex Barth, Evan Lazar. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.